We happy in the west, the bay to the south. Cuddies and Impalas, hydraulics showing out. Squeeze play, trigonomic, airing suckers out. G-dots to the pin for my goon sitting down. Getting skrill about a stack, you know I'm bout it. 20K on the dash, you can count it.
Hey, what's good with everybody, man? I hope everybody's having a productive day, feeling blessed, and like I always say, it's one life, one chance. We only got one chance to do this right. Let's get it done. With that being said, this one's going to be a follow-up in regards to certain questions that were asked about me about Mondo Quinn, and the certain particular details that I left in there, only to lead up to this video, because I already knew everybody was going to ask me these certain particular questions, so I decided to see, you know what? What's the hold-up? Might as well answer these questions thoroughly. It's 6 in the morning. I'm drinking my cup of joe, my Folgers mixed with the vanilla, caramel, blueberry, sprinkled with cinnamon and some other stuff. Butterscotch chocolate, whatever you guys want to call it. Usually this is all some new creamers out here. My thing is I love my coffee, so I like to experience with different creamers. I like to taste, you know, the finer things in life, even though it doesn't mean much to everybody else. But in jail, all we had was hazelnut, French vanilla most of the damn time, and then sometimes, you know, if you had enough money and you went through a walking horse packaging company, you can get all the good creamers. So, you know, that's one of my little things I like to do out here is I like to buy different creamers and enjoy my coffee every morning. It's 6 in the morning, baby mama's still asleep. I got to do like 2 or 3 more videos to stay ahead of time. So with that being said, let's get into it. After hearing the story about Mondo Quinn and how I was reporting to him, how I was working with them on Sea Yard, how my celly was the authority in charge, everybody asked how Thudi, you know, the ex-Mexican Mafia, and Artie, ex-Mexican Mafia, how I brought those two up, and how Mondo and Thudi played a part in getting me removed. Now, like I said, as soon as I arrived to Side FC Yard, and I submitted my log bundle and my whole educational bundle, my personal bundle, everything was up for review. But remember, if you watch one of my previous videos, I told you my boy Droopy, which was from Isa Poros, who was an hermano at the time, he was pretty much jotting down anything and everything that I was doing out of state. When I got to Oklahoma and I took over that yard for a certain period of time and I started rearranging the COC, and then I went, after that riot happened with the Southsiders going at it with the cops, I wound up going to AdSeg, so I had to relinquish my authority in charge position to him, and I became the overall authority in AdSeg, overseeing the AdSegs and all the inmates that were going back to California. While I was in that pod in Oklahoma, there was a porter that was coming from the main lines that used to come there every day. He used to pass out the trays, he used to clean the pods, pass out our razors, pass out our mail, all that stuff. So it was real easy to gain access to the main line. Homie would shoot me little phones here and there so I could circulate to the homies so they can call their families and their loved ones. I used to rent that phone out to some of the Sureños, other group segments and other factions, you know, to make a little extra money to, you know, generate some type of revenue for us in the back so we weren't starving and we weren't going without. So he would send me reports back and I had to relinquish my contact to Bubbles to him. This was like in 2009, 2010. I wound up coming back in 2011. Bubbles already pretty much got busted, but before Bubbles got busted, you know, he was in contact with Bubbles. So I don't know if, you know, Bubbles told him to gather all this information about me. If maybe he reported me to Bubbles. Maybe he got in contact with another carnal that I was unaware of and started reporting it. But yeah, I was already pending a lot of charges and pending investigation for some of the crimes that I committed, some of the laws that I broke, and a lot of the freelancing that I was doing. That wasn't my fault, but because I lost contact with a lot of individuals and I didn't have the proper jurisdictions of who to report to back to California, it was kind of hard to send money and send reports back to California, not knowing who I needed to report to. So what I did is I withheld a lot of that stuff, a lot of the proper documents, a lot of proper investigations, a lot of the log reports, and I was just sending them back as inmates were going back to California. Mind you, we had a household bank that wasn't even held by me, but a lot of that money was sitting with particular individuals, and I'll break that down in another video. So technically, I wasn't even in possession of the money that belonged to the NF, to the carnales I was supposed to go back. It was just being held until further notice, until I got the proper paperwork necessary to send the money to. I didn't get that paperwork till I was already in AdSeg pending transfer back to California of the C payroll that Bubbles had provided for the facility in Arizona and Oklahoma. But that's a story for another time. When I became the second in command in SAT FC yard, I was responsible for the in-house security. Norteño Administration 1, there's Norteño Administration 2, and then there's the NT. Those were called maestros, and he had his department, which was the AMs 1 and 2 for each tier that reported back to him, which was assistant maestros. The Norteño Administration 1 is in-house department. Norteño Administration 2 is the yard department, which would have to do with the squads and all that. But still, being that I was second in command, I had an Administration 1, Administration 2, then I had the NT, which is the maestro who runs the educational department. The Norteño Administration runs the in-house department, and Administration 2 runs the yard department. All three of them report to me in they generalize the reports that are coming from the bottom to the top, give me one final report, and I pretty much submit it to the authority in charge, and that's how the chain of command works. But the second in command, I'm still also responsible to oversee the whole yard, each and every single department, how individuals are getting educated, how individuals are securing the yard when it comes to weaponry and squad procedures, and the in-house departments, which is how each block channel is running each block, how each tier security is running its tier, how many weapons are being generated, so on and so forth. But the practice that I was trying to incorporate was, I told myself, I go, every time we go to yard, all we're doing is walking in laps, doing observation posts, yard security. We're securing, we have SBs, and we're just walking in groups of 2 and groups of 3, a whole yard. I go, we need to start, if the only way I'm going to incorporate these plans of attack against the Southerners, the whites, since we've already been going to war with them on a consistent basis, I need to be able to find ways and tactics to maneuver our way close to each and every group segment, which the whites most of the time and the Southerners share the same area, and those have always been our primary and potential targets when it comes to taking stances of aggression in guerra and war. He asked me, what do I suggest? And I go, bro, our pull-up bars and our workout area is like across the yard from these individuals. I go, these individuals are going to see it coming no matter what. Every time we take that lap, they have their posts, they have their observations, they will monitor us just as much as we monitor them. We have to find a way to get familiar and get as close as possible to them, so in the future endeavors, if we ever have to develop an element of surprise, they've already used to it. I go, bro, we got to start telling our homies to go start playing basketball, playing handball, and playing football, so we can always remain close to them as much as possible and find little avenues on the yard to start planting weapons. At first, my sully was he wasn't inclined in doing so, and I kept telling him, I go, bro, how else do you expect to develop a plan of attack when we do circles, we do counterclockwise circles every day? The element of surprise that we start sending 5 groups of 3 all with weapons all at one time, the Southerners and the whites are going to notice that, bro. We're just pretty much just going to go ahead of fade. Mexicans stand up and start fighting each other. It's not going to work. I go, especially if we're outnumbered this much, we need to be able to develop a plan to send a minimum amount of homies so we don't lose the yard. We can leave homies behind, but send homies to engage and have at least the upper hand temporarily until we get overwhelmed. I go, look, the handball courts and the basketball courts is right next to the Sureños and the whites area. Homies need to go out there and play basketball. I go, besides, I go, wow, we're not at war. The homies shouldn't have to be focused on walking laps, and that's all they could do for the yard. And a couple of us do burpees, because it's a 180 design, so we encourage homies when it's yard day, go out there, be ready to secure the household, come back, do your workout in the house. Don't do workout on the yards, because, we don't want to be placed in vulnerable positions while half of our homies are doing burpees and focusing on the squad procedures and the squad routines, and then get engaged upon by other group segments. We're caught with our hands in our pants. So he finally caved into it. And that's when all hell broke loose. Because the more we practiced it, I was telling homies, just play football. Don't go to the extreme. Pay attention to your surroundings. Homies, go play handballs, groups of 2, groups of 3, with one posted. Pay attention to the surrounding areas. A couple of homies go play basketball with the blacks. Since we have an alliance with them, they trust us to be on the basketball court with them, so on and so forth. I incorporated this we were in 7 block at the time, and I incorporated this same policies and procedures in 5 block. In 5 block, we had about 35 homies. In my building, we had about 28 homies. So, I can't oversee anything and everything that's going on in 5 block. I just have to make sure that they're in accordance to all the household procedures set in place. And I have appointed individuals a block channel that's responsible for all that security. So there was a lot riding on that man's shoulders, along with the yard department as well. The yard is what's called the yard channel, the YC. So those two individuals alone are responsible for the 35 individuals that are in that yard. You know, I can't oversee and I can't watch all these demonstrations and these demos take place and these practices. They have to do that. Now, obviously, it was the beginning of 2012. I'm not sure if it was December or January of 2011 going into 2012. It was one of those 2 months. They were playing football, and the homies actually went a little too far with the football and threw the football in the area and were running towards their area. So it made it look like it was a planned attack. And we also had homies by the bathroom area that were using the restroom, but when they were watching the game as they were using the restroom, so it made it seem like they were watching and waiting and anticipating an attack from the field going towards the southern area. And there were Southerners within that immediate area of the bathroom stall watching and observing as well, and the Southerners jumped the gun. They wound up rushing the homies in the bathroom area, and they also started rushing the homies in the football area, while the homies were only just running towards the football. And it happened just to cross outside the grass into the track going towards their area. And you know, the Sudanese and the whites did what they had to do, and it caused a big war on the yard. Big war, big riot. 4 Northerners got airlifted and everybody went to the hole. So now we got placed on a serious lockdown for about 3 months pending investigation. Because this is when 2012, this is when it became illegal to start putting us on lockdown for like 1 to 2 to 3 years. They were doing that when I first got to prison. We'd be on lockdown for years before they would uplift the program. Now it's after 90 days, we start doing the MAC rep meetings. They start escorting MAC reps around the yard to talk to everybody, and they start releasing inmates little by little. You know, the court order was we can't be locked down no longer than 90 days and be deprived of all our inmate rights and privileges. You know, a lot of Sureños, a lot of Northerners were always filing complaints with the courts like, man, these long lockdowns, these long periods of lockdowns are cruel and unusual punishment. It's deprivation of inmate rights, and the courts agreed with it. So through this 90-day period, I'm chopping it up. They don't do no searches. Administration is just trying to figure out what took place. So obviously, Marcelli was the MAC rep at the time, which he shouldn't have been because he was the authority in charge, but he was the MAC rep when Listo was the authority in charge. So they kept pulling him out, and I kept telling him, like, hey, bro, you need to relinquish your MAC rep duties. That's not your position no more, bro. You're just going to be targeted as, you know, the gang leader. But he was like, bro, now is an important time for me to go speak up and see what's going on. I go, bro, you're honestly just going to... The Sureños already know who me, you, Listo were, and the homie from Grifas and the other homie from Delenos. I didn't know we're individuals with status. We're the appointed leaders here. I go, all you're doing is just putting us on Front Street. So if they wanted to retaliate again, just to have the upper hand and blast us, we're on site, bro. I go, so you doing that, just making it even worse. But, you know, Marcelli was arrogant. He was older. He was, you know, he was one of those, you know, Pintero homies, them strict homies from the, like, I believe it was a city in the Monterey County area. I'm not too sure. But he decided to open up discussions and talk to Southerners and whites about what happened and what took place. But within that 90-day lockdown period, a lot of the individuals that were involved in that riot went to classification, went to committee, and a lot of them got placed back. The only ones that stood in ADSEG were the Sureños that were caught with weapons and that were identified as using weapons on the yard. This whole situation fell back on me because the homies that got engaged upon didn't have weapons on them, didn't drop their weapons in time. So it made it look like it was a breach of security on the overall household, which was me. Marcelli is not responsible for that household. Marcelli is responsible for just the yard in itself, answering for the yard and talking to the carnales in the back. Plain and simple. Can't get into too much details, but so that takes place. Marcelli is coming back from these MAC rep meetings, and he's pretty much trying to make it seem like to the Southern faction and white faction that he's just the MAC rep. He's not the appointed authority in charge, but that he's reporting to somebody else. Southerners says they're gonna reach back to the back and let the homies know what's going on. At this time, we didn't wind up bumping the CO for the phone until later on, right after the lockdown. So we were pretty much using communication through letters, trying to get back to Mondo. And remind you, that's a process. You know, my letters are gonna take a few weeks to reach to the streets. you know, my family's gonna have to do it on their time out whenever my family gets to it. And those girls that I had three-way contacts, whenever they write the letters and shoot it to Mondo, and then it has to go back from Mondo to, you know, get it to Mondo is gonna take a couple of weeks, and then going back to the girls, and then the girls coming back. You know, it's a long process. It's a very long process. So I didn't have enough time to report to Mondo what actually did happen. Now, in this process, you know, as usual, you know, the Sureños are always been the biggest faction and the one with the most connects. And, you know, they got it sewed up from the ground up. They had a direct line of contact, not with Duty, but with Artie. I guess this was Artie's yard at the time, but there was a power struggle going on between Artie and Duty over taking over the yards, where the Mesa at the time was working for Artie. And this is all information that I acquired later when I was on the SNY side, because like I said, I used to associate and kick it with a lot of ex-Southerners, Sureños that were from the mainline. You know, I love hearing the Sureño politics and the Sureño stories, man. Every single one of them is unique and different. They work for this big homie. They work for that big homie. They answered to this big homie. They went to war with this big homie with his soldados. You know, the Sureño culture, that cultura, is so much different, and it was so intriguing and interesting because it was so different from ours. So I used to love picking their brains and hearing about these stories, and I actually ran into like 2 or 3 ex-Southerners that became Cinqueros. I used to always tell my homies, hey, bro, I was on the main line with him when all this happened, and when he got done dirty, a lot of my homies used to come up and talk to me and be like, damn, fool, I guess you were that boy on the main line. I was like, nah, I just got victimized, and, you know, I did a lot of things wrong. But there was 3 Southerners that were from that particular moment that were in Tehachapi that became Cinqueros at the time. One of them, his name was Reaper. He was from Orange County at the time, but I used to, every time he'd see me in Azeg, I used to tell him, like, hey, bro, let's try not to talk about that, you know, particular situation, bro. You know, it's a lot of stuff going on right there, you know what I mean? I don't need nobody to know about it. So while this ongoing war between these 2 carnales were going on behind the scenes, Duty was in a position of power at that time, along with some individual named Wedo from Verdugo that wanted to take over this yard. From what the Southerners were telling me, that Artie was losing his position of power, losing his influence, and because this particular situation had taken place, this was Duty's chance to move in. So I get this kite one day that was sent through the chain of command. The Sureños pretty much gave it to a Northern and said, hey, can you make sure your homies get this kite? It's perfectly sealed, and it says, all it says on the outside is via Troy. That's all it said. I don't know who Troy was, what Southerner that was, so on and so forth. And so I wind up getting this kite, and I open it, and it's a kite wrapped over another kite, and the kite's coming from the Sureño faction, La Mesa, and it pretty much says, hey, it gave us a list of particular individuals that said pretty much that they were going to take over the Mesa for this mistake that happened, for causing this unnecessary war and for engaging upon your homies, that we're answering for Duty. Duty has a message for you. And it pretty much broken down that this upcoming Mesa was going to overthrow this Mesa on the concept of mutiny. That's when I first learned what a mutiny was through these individuals. I'm pretty sure one of them individuals, his name was Chino from Hawaiian Gardens, was on that list. He was the one that pretty much writing the kite, like, look, get back to me later after you read this kite. So I open up the kite, and it's written pretty good. You know, they handwritten it from from a clap. Got a message from him, rewrote everything he wanted to tell me, and he pretty much was telling me. And it was crazy how we started it, because he's like, "Hey, Carnalito, I'm one of the elders of, you know, this such and such and such. My name is Turi from Cucamonga." He goes, I'm asking if it's okay with you, if you can pull up a chair on my porch under this porch light, and we can discuss some certain matters. Like, he got on me all philosophical, and I was like, what the hell is this? You know, my big homies don't talk to me like that. He just went real philosophical on me. So he goes, so as we're discussing matters at this table, I'm going to address this. I understand that this war took place. You have to understand where my people are coming from. They were defending the household, but we will reconcile this situation. I'm in contact with Mondo. Mondo told me to get at you. That's only because Mondo was 3-waying through me. So Mondo was kind of under the assumption that I'm running the yard, when I already had advised Mondo, no, Marcelli has a yard. I'm just a 3-way contact. So Mondo's talking with Duty, saying, hey, man, just get at the homie. Mind you, people ask the question, like, how did Mondo and Duty come up with this decision to get rid of me? What people need to understand is, we answered to the NF, Northern Structure at the time, Nuestra Raza, Norteño Struggle, however you guys want to label it. But it's only because I just submit my reports to these individuals. I send them their money. I relay messages to the streets. I give them updates of what the prison, how the prison is running, and then pulling individuals for the Norteño struggle, who's working for who. That's it. We don't have to sit there and write the NF and be like, hey, bro, we need to get this dude removed. Can you sanction it? No. If we want to go to war, we're going to go to war and tell them, hey, bro, we're at war right now. We'll get at you later. Here's your money. We'll take care of you guys as much as possible. So on and so forth. Most of the time, they're just going to just open up investigations if they feel like some things that were taking place on the yard were unjustifiable or need more input on. But we don't have to ask them permission from nothing. At least that's how it was in my era. We just reported to them like, hey, man, this is how it's going. We send our love. So Mondo tells Studi, get at the homie. That's the homie that runs the yard. So I'm reading this kite, and I'm gonna submit it to my celly. My celly was at a Mac rep meeting at the time when I received the kite, and I'm reading it. And he's pretty much saying that, look, I'm gonna rectify the situation. All I'm asking is for your palabra that you guys are not gonna retaliate, and in due time I will take care of everything, and I'm gonna replace this mesa. Just give me your palabra that you'll give me enough time to take care of what I need to take care of and replace this mesa with más soldados. And then he went and broke it down. He goes, "Beg, you're more than welcome to any time to pull up a chair at my table, on my porch." And that's how he ended it, in the same way he opened it. And I'm like, the hell? Like, dude, I never been talked to like that. And I've dealt with a lot of carnales, bro. My carnales were straight to the point. So my celly comes back. I let him read it. And my celly was like, damn, we made it to the big leagues. We're being all arrogant. I'm like, hell yeah, now we're talking to the Mexican mafia food. We're getting excited a little bit. But I told my celly, like, so what do you want to do? And my celly goes, you know what? Let's see what they do. If they don't do nothing, we'll get our get backs. I said, all right, that was the decision we made. So my celly gave me everything he wanted to write. I rewrote it because I know how to mini write real good. I submitted it back to the Southerner faction. I gave it to some individual named Wino from Eastside Dukes. That's who I gave it to. So I gave it to him. It goes to its proper channels, and we wait. And we pretty much said, you know what? We're gonna have to give it a little bit amount of time, bro. That way we don't go. Nobody wants to go to war, even though our people got hurt. Even though we had the right to retaliate. Maseli, being that this was his first yard that he was in possession of power with, I don't think he really wanted to go to war that bad, that serious. It's once you go to war, we're going to war for like 2 or 3 years before it de-escalates. So we give it some time, and sure enough, Thudi replaces all Artie soldiers. Artie had a bunch of individuals that were working for him, like from Orange County, and like pretty much the Orange County car was running that area at the time, and from what it looked like. And I just remember seeing back to back, because they were releasing the Southerners on the yard by themselves, and then we'd have our yard by ourselves, and we just kept hearing yard down, yard down, yard down. I know an individual named Bouncer was removed, another individual named Scooby was removed, a bunch of individuals were getting removed. Altogether, it was about 5 or 6 individuals that got removed off that yard. And then out of nowhere, we're up and running again, program started, and Thudi pretty much replaced the whole mesa that was working for Artie. And Artie, I guess from later on when I found out about the Southerners, Artie got relinquished of this yard, and it became Thudi's yard. And Thudi started generating money and started taking over everything. And I remember sitting in the cell like, damn, bro, like telling my celly, like, boy, that boy got power. That boy was able to just get everybody removed, put his soldiers in order. And me and my celly were going over like, damn, that's the kind of power I want. That's the kind of hand I want to have. That's some powerful stuff. Like, me and my celly were just amazed how this man was able to do it in a swift, significant amount of time. And Thudi took over the yard. Well, we get released on program. We start programming. Tension's high. Everybody's on high alert. We're filling each other out. It goes on for about a good 2-3 months. Lo and behold, guess what happens? JCat comes. A JCat, I mean by JCat is an individual who's just not highly intelligent, thinks we're going to war because we failed to report to other facilities that everything was established, that we're to cease fire at the moment. We're going to come out and program. We were too busy contacting the bag, too busy trying to get everything back in order during this lockdown. After this lockdown period, me and my celly did bump this CO. So we started focusing on that, lost track of everything else, establishing a branching union with every other facility to keep them abreast of that we're not going to go to war. So individuals were getting transferred from the level 3s and receptions coming to our facility thinking we're at war. And this individual comes in the building, sees a Southerner programmer, and rushes him. And because he rushes him, there was a couple of homies that were in the day room at the time, that were porters that ran from the other section. And they started fighting in the rotunda and the day room section and the C section in 5 block. That's what happened. That's what took place. So it made it seem like as if we caused an unnecessary one. We engaged back. One person got hurt out of this whole process. And that was actually a homeboy from San Jose. He hurt, but he was already having back issue problems. His back would get thrown out a lot. So when he got body slammed, it hurt his back. And once again, we went right back on lockdown. So while we go back on lockdown, the homie Bautista's reporting back to Mondo behind our backs in secrecy, like I told you in the last videos, and reported me and Marcelli. That we pretty much weren't focusing on the yard. We were focusing on, establishing this pipeline with the cell phones, which we were. But I was already pending investigation anyways, and that's when Marcelli got the kite later on down the road from Mondo through Bautista saying, hey, bro, get rid of this individual. Why? Because Thudi, I guess, got into Mondo's ear saying like, hey, man, your homies got released and your homie pretty much engaged on my people when he already gave me his palabra that he wouldn't. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that the end of hostilities kicked in maybe 1 or 2 years after my removal, but they were already in discussions of back of working hand in hand and having a strong established communication line with one another, that Mondo took it upon himself to say, you know what, I'll get rid of this individual. Pretty much Mondo now reconciling this situation after Thudi done did that favor. That way the program can go back to normal. Both sides can start making money and they can get their money that they want. Remember, this game is about power and money. That's all these individuals in the back cared about while we're out here fighting each other for unnecessary reasons, hurting each other, victimizing each other, shedding bloodshed over a particular yard. And these two factions are in the back just like, well, whatever they're going through, they're either going to squash it, give us some money, or we're going to start hurting people and show them that, their extent of power. And that's how I got victimized, all because Thudi brought it up. Hey, man, this individual broke his palabra, which I didn't. But like I said, Mondo was already questioning me throughout time, and I was submitting reports through Bautista back to Mondo about like, this is what happened, yes. But the thing where I did wrong was, I took it upon myself to admit my flaws, admit my charges, because I didn't feel no reason to hide from him, because I was pretty much trying to tell him like, man, I was in a jurisdiction. It's not that I was uneducated. I was just being miseducated. I think there's a big difference. So I admitted to all my charges. So I thought personally, because Marcelli said, you know what, you're just probably going to get, AOL, we're probably going to have to clean up and do a pegada and go to the back and go to the shoe and report to these individuals. But I didn't think much of it, because I was like, man, if I go to the shoe and go back there and report, and I'm back there for like 1, 2, 3 years for an attempted murder or assault with a deadly weapon, I'll probably become a carnal and just get educated back there with the C's. So I wasn't really stressing on it, not knowing the severity of my charges were some charges and laws that I broke in that the NF will not overlook, especially when it comes to burning them for their money. Which I can't say that I burnt them, but I can honestly say this. A lot more money wasn't sent to the back, to Corcoran Shoe, that should have been. But we had a lot of money out there in Arizona and Oklahoma where, I felt like, whatever I was sending was sufficient enough. While I blessed the household, blessed my brothers, took care of my family. I was working hard for this money. I don't see why I have to shoot more than 50, 60% of that money when I thought I was supposed to shoot a third. But to them, it's like the more money we made, the more money we needed to contribute, as opposed to the simple $200-300 a month to these particular individuals. That's where they felt played. So while the big homies in the back were feeling played that they didn't get all their money and that I wasn't submitting reports on a consistent basis, I was considered freelancing, along with some other charges that I'll talk about in another video. Thudi also felt that I broke my promise because an individual came off the bus, seen a Southerner, and rushed him, and it caused another ruckus again and put us right back on lockdown. So them losing out on this money and them not being able to bring in and smuggle in and do what they got to do and conduct their business fell back on me. Didn't fall back on Marcelli, because Marcelli failed to admit his part in it, admit that, or back me up. Why? Because Marcelli was more ambitious and was willing to throw me under the bus to save his own life. And that's pretty much what happened. That's how it all worked out. I know to a lot of individuals it might not make a lot of sense, because there's some particular details that I have to skip out to not incriminate nobody, but that's how pretty much it played out. And I used to laugh about it later. I was like, man, I used to tell Sudanese on the SNY, like, man, Thudi had a part of my removal, but you know, most of my removal was based on my actions and me not following the law like I was supposed to, as opposed to, but as well as Thudi also putting it in the homie's ear, like, hey, bro, your little homie, you know, broke his palabra. Because think about it. You know, I don't know the extent of power on each side, how much they had, but them going to war, them not having them in the back having an unestablished line of communication could have messed things up. So that was more important to them to say, you know what, we'll get rid of ours too. So I think it was a show of power on Mondo's behalf to say, you know what, I could take care of this. Don't even trip. And that's how it happened. So with that being said, I hope I answered you guys' questions in regards to, you know, how Thudi played a role into it and how they were communicating with one another. And my next video, which will be after this weekend, I'll probably drop it, will be about the charges that I had to face when it comes to my removal, how I got removed. That way you guys can have an understanding of, you know, what took place in my situation. And then I'll get back to answering your guys' questions and continue along with my prison stories in prison. So thank you guys for your guys' time, your guys' support. And like I always say, it's one life, one chance. We only got one chance to do this right. Let's get it done. Peace.